fam. Welcome to You Ain't Imagining This. I'm Amma Robin, your sister host and guide here in YAIT Town. And today we are back at one of my favorite places, the Umoja Cafe. So yes, you are welcome. Come as you are, and as always, take what you need. This is a trauma-aware space, and I'm very proud of that. This is a space where we don't rush past what we experience, and we don't judge ourselves or others for how we've learned to carry it. I've been sitting here thinking about the two stories that we shared this month. The first one, before I finished speaking, and then the second one, I stayed this time. The same kind of moment in both. Yes, I was talking during a meeting and someone interrupted me or they started talking over me. But that wasn't where the real action was. It was the same moment, it was the same meeting room, and yet something shifted. Not in a dramatic way, and not in a way that would necessarily be obvious from the outside. That's what I'm saying. It wasn't the interruption, although that was something. The main event was something that happened within me, and that was something different, and that has been sitting with me. Not just what happened in those moments, but what we bring to those kind of moments. Because, and this I think is astonishing, we do not walk into rooms empty. We are not a blank slate. As you may remember from the story, I had a lot of thoughts and a lot of feelings going into that room. I wasn't a blank slate. I walked in with everything that I'd learned over the years. Everything that I or we have absorbed, everything we've carried, this is for all of us, about how to move, how to read a space, how to stay safe, how to belong. And that's where I've been spending some time, right here, thinking. Because here in YAIT Town, we move through three things. Can you say it with me? Naming, restoring, and imagining. In the first story and in our first Espresso Talk, we focused on naming what happened, the interruption, naming what we learned, and naming how we move without judgment. But once something is named, we can't stop there. That is just the beginning. We can ask, what do we do with what we've seen? And that's where we are now. We're beginning to move into restoring, not fixing, not correcting, and never judging, and not trying to become someone else, but beginning to understand what we're carrying and how we might carry it differently. So today, I'm not going to rush through this. I'm going to sit with it. I always enjoy sitting with an espresso. And I'm going to sit with this and think about it and think this through out loud with you. And I really appreciate your being here. Think about what we've learned, what we've internalized, and about what we've been taught to hold. And of course, what we've never given space to say. I'm going to think about that one. As you listen, you don't have to agree with everything. You don't have to figure anything out right away. Neither do I. We're just going to stay with it. And if something feels familiar, if something feels true, please take a moment to notice that. And if this space supports you, and if it names something that you've been carrying, please share it. Because there's someone else right now who's sitting with something similar and may not have named it yet. All right, let's sit with this together. Thank you so much for being here. So sitting here at the Umoja Cafe with an espresso really gives me time to think and reflect and to ponder. And I used to spend a lot of time judging, but I'm trying to stop that now. But I keep finding myself returning to that room in both stories. And remember, and before I finish speaking, I'm talking and someone cuts right in and interrupts me, and all the energy shifts away, and I don't say anything. I think about it, I want to, I almost do, and then I stop it. I stop myself. Again and again, I keep hearing those words, that word that stops me from speaking up. Do you remember that word? It was don't. Don't. I heard it repeatedly. And it was basically, oh, don't be a disruptor. Don't make a big deal out of this. Don't complain too much. Don't risk isolating yourself. All those things happened in a flash and so quickly. And so, what did I do? I didn't. I just sat there. And then in the second story, I stayed this time. It was different. So of course, somebody did cut me off, and the room shifted away to that person. And I had a different experience, a different thought. And so when a second opened up, I stepped back in. I stayed with it. And the energy shifted back to me. And yeah, I was still hearing the don't. But this time, I decided to do. And I'm not saying either one is better. It's just different. On a different day, I might have done the same thing. I might have gone with the don't. I use this parallel kind of storytelling to experience this twice, and not to show a right way or a wrong way, and not to correct anything, but just to sit with that same kind of moment and begin to notice what shifts when something inside of me shifted. And since then, I've been thinking about that even more deeply and, more consciously. And I keep coming back to a single word. This time it's not don't. This time it is socialization. Yeah. And socialization, I've studied this in school and in college and in various different courses, but socialization isn't just a concept. It's not just some vague thing. It's a process that we all live through. If you're going to live in society, there's going to be a certain level of socialization. It's how we learn what's acceptable and what's rewarded, what's risky, and what's expected of us in the different spaces we move through. And it's a lifelong learning process. It comes sometimes from what we're told directly, but just as often, maybe even more often, I think, it comes from what we observe. What happens to us? What happens to other people? What gets rewarded and affirmed? What gets corrected and punished? And over time, I do think we learn how to adjust. I'm not saying that's a bad thing. It's just an observation I'm making. But when I think about my own life and about, as a Black woman, how I think about my life, I know that there's another layer to it. And this one is different. This one has more attached to it. This one I think of and call racial socialization. Yeah, that's a little different, isn't it? That has a different feel. That's the learning that happens specifically because of how race shapes our learning. Yes, race is always in the race. It's what teaches us how to move in spaces where we're not always centered, or not always protected, not always fully seen. And I also think not valued. Now, I'm not saying, don't know if racial socialization is a bad thing. Maybe on a deeper level, yes. But it also does teach us something. It teaches us how to anticipate, how to read tone. I talk a lot about hypervigilance. That's where that comes from. We learn how to read tone. We learn how to notice shifts in the energy. We learn how to calculate, often in seconds, what's going to keep things smooth and what might disrupt the room. And I think this is not abstract. This is lived on a daily basis. And I just want to be clear. If you think I'm judging you, I promise you I'm not. I can see this in myself. And I'm not judging myself either. These are observations I'm making here. I can see it in how I listen before I speak. I can see it sometimes how I soften what I'm saying, depending upon who I'm talking to. I can see it in how I decide in real time whether fighting for something is worth it. Gosh, I just had that experience today, but truthfully, I have it probably every day. These are not random choices. These are learned responses. Constantly calculating and deciding and thinking and assessing, and all of this in just a flash, in just a few minutes, and maybe not even on a conscious level. Gosh, no wonder we feel so much stress. These are learned responses, and over time, these responses don't stay outside of us. They're not supposed to. They move inside. That is what I call, and what I'm learning, as internalization. That's right. When what we've learned outside and it's happening outside gets just absorbed into us. Now it's operating all of the time. Internalization, I think, is, yes, something we've learned from the outside world becomes part of how we operate on the inside, part of our mindset without needing to think about it consciously. It becomes automatic, embodied. It becomes what feels like this is just how I am. And this is where I keep coming back to something Dr. Carter G. Woodson, this man is so quotable and so deep. I think about stuff he says all the time. And he talked about how when you teach someone that they are inferior, you don't have to tell them where to go. You don't have to tell them to go in the back door. They'll go in the back door on their own. And if there is no back door, they'll make one. They'll demand one. Now, that's not, of course, a full quote, but that's just how I remember what he said about that, and that really stuck with me about what we will accept once everything has been internalized. When I first heard that, it did stay with me, but sitting with it now, in the context of these stories, it does feel a little different, and not because any of that was about weakness. And it's not about something being wrong with the person or that the person is inferior. Absolutely not. It's just about what has been learned, repeated, reinforced constantly. It is about survival. And sometimes going to the back door means you get to stay in the building. Sometimes it means you remain safe. And sometimes you get access to something you wouldn't otherwise have had. These are choices people make. We all make on a daily basis. So again, I'm not judging that. But we do, I think, have to be able to see it and to name it. And to say honestly, I've learned how to move in ways that help me navigate. And sometimes those ways are so internalized that I don't even notice them anymore. But I want to be able to notice them. And as I've been sitting here thinking about all of this over my coffee, my espresso, I keep coming back to something else. Not just what we learn to do or to say, but what we learn not to say and not to do. What we learn to carry quietly And this is where something deeper comes in, something that is harder to talk about. I've been thinking about a story that Dr. Howard Stevenson shares in his book, Promoting Racial Literacy in Schools. And this story is about a girl named Sarah Collins Rudolph. Have you heard of Sarah Collins Rudolph? Probably not. Sarah was a child, one of the children who was injured when the 16th Street Baptist Church was bombed in Birmingham in 1963. Remember that? 4 little girls were killed. Sarah was a sister to one of those girls, and she was there. And she was seriously injured. She wasn't killed, but she was there. And her story is really interesting, and it's unfortunate that her story isn't told more. I'm going to read just a paragraph from Dr. Stevenson's book because he discusses it so clearly, and I think her story deserves to be told. So here we are. Let's see. Sarah Collins Rudolph lost her left eye in the bombing, and the prosthetic eye that was given to her was so flimsy and ill-fitting that she was constantly terrified that it might fall out. Yes, in the bombing, she was severely injured. As a child, she endured unspeakable humiliation about her looks as she was constantly ridiculed. She experienced nightmares and other post-traumatic stress symptoms, such as jumping whenever she heard loud noises. Now, Dr. Stevenson goes on to talk about Sarah's experience after the bombing. What I found most troublesome about her story was not just that her trauma led to a life of pain, alcoholism, and eventual recovery. It was not the horror of living daily with pieces of glass permanently embedded in her eyes, chest, and abdomen, too life-threatening to remove. It was not the scars on her face and body that reminded her daily of the bombing. The most painful aspect of her story for me was how the church responded to the bombing. According to Sarah, the church never spoke about it. The church never spoke about it. Even after the church had been rebuilt, the fear of more bombing and terrorism from the KKK left the people of the church silent, as if talking about it would bring more horror. Well, Sarah, I think, was considered one of the lucky ones. She lived, she survived, but she lived with unspeakable trauma and pain and humiliation. And to add to it, she lived with the silence. How there wasn't a space for her to talk about what she had experienced, not in her church, not fully in her family. And I understand they didn't want to keep talking about it and keep reliving it. I really do understand that. And that silence wasn't careless. It wasn't meant to harm her. It was meant to protect her. People were trying to survive and to move on and to forget and to stop reliving what they were probably reliving every day anyway. They were trying to hold themselves together and to move forward. But what happens when something that big, something that traumatic, has nowhere to go, is not discussed, is silenced? As we can see from Sarah's experience, it doesn't disappear. It stays in the body, in the nervous system, in how a person moves through the world. The nightmares, the startled responses, the fear, and something else. It's a word I've mentioned many times on this show. The invisibility. not just being unseen by the world, but having your experience go unspoken, unacknowledged, and unprocessed. That itself is a form of trauma. And I sit here thinking about that, and I realize how connected that is to what we've been exploring and what we've been reflecting on. Not because everything we carry looks that extreme. A bombing, that's pretty extreme. But the pattern is familiar. The moments that we don't name, and the experiences that we move past, the things we just deal with. And over time, that becomes a way of living, of holding things in, carrying them quietly. And sometimes we call that strength, but sometimes it's endurance. But, and I'm so glad that Dr. Stevenson talked about this, endurance on its own is not healing. This is something he does speak to very well. He says that when we don't talk about these experiences, when we don't name them, we don't reduce the stress. We often increase it because we're carrying it without processing it. And that brings me back to why we are here today and why I'm sitting here in this wonderful, beautiful Umoja cafe with my third espresso. Because that's why we tell these stories. It's why we name what happened in before I finish speaking, that the interruption has to be named. And why I experienced something different in I stayed this time. Because that experience with the interruption, but my deciding to step into it and to break that cycle has to be named, not judged, it's named. Because storytelling isn't just reflection, it's a way of bringing what's internal, what's being experienced internally, out into the open. It's a way of saying, this happened, this is how I felt, and this is how I moved. And in doing that, something does change. It's no longer just sitting inside of me anymore. And when I share it, and I really appreciate that you allow me to share it with you, I can begin to realize that I'm not the only one. And that matters. That matters so much because isolation intensifies what we carry. And recognition, shared understanding, begins to ease it. We're talking about ease. We're not talking justify or that it goes away or anything like that, but it softens it inside. So when I think about those moments in the meeting now, I'm not just thinking about what I did. I'm thinking about what I brought with me, what I learned, what I internalized, and I'm asking something different. And this is really a big deal for me. I'm not asking, why did I do that? But what was I carrying in that moment? What was inside of me when that happened? And what would it feel like to stay with myself just a little longer? That's right. Not to try to forget it and move on and release it and act like it didn't happen or to silence myself. Self-silencing is real. But that I could just stay with it, stay with myself. Not perfectly and not every time, but enough to notice that it was important. It was meaningful to me. It mattered. Enough to have a moment where something else might be then, once I really open this up, might be possible. And to me, that's when I really begin to dig in and to double down. And So I'm sitting in the Umoja cafe thinking about this shift. And that's when it comes to me that naming something, being able to see it clearly, is powerful. It really is. And it's opened up my eyes to so many things. But it's not the end of the process. Because once I can say, this is what happened, this is how I moved, this is what I did, this is what I've been carrying, something in me doesn't want to just leave it there. It just doesn't feel like enough. And I think that's where restoring comes in. Not fixing what happened, not going back and doing it over. I wish I could do overs, but they don't happen. One of the ways this happens is through storytelling. Being able to say, this happened to me, without having to explain it. Without having to justify why it mattered. Without having to convince someone that it really did happen. Just being able to say it and have someone understand immediately. Oh, that feels so good. And that really does something to me. It takes the edge off that feeling of, was it just me? I think that a lot. And replaces it with, no, I see it too. And that matters more than we often realize. So much of what we carry, especially in moments like being interrupted or overlooked or diminished, comes with a kind of quiet isolation. The moment passes, but the feeling lingers. The embarrassment, the questioning, sometimes even a kind of small humiliation that we don't always name out loud. And when that just stays inside, it takes something from us. It depletes us in some way. So restoring for me often begins with not carrying it alone, with being in spaces and with people where I know I'm seen, where I know I matter, where I don't have to shrink the story or make it more comfortable for someone else to hear. Even being able to raise these questions, to sit with them like this, to say them out loud, this part is restoring. Sitting here in the Umoja Cafe and saying this out loud and knowing that people around here, around in this room with me, would understand if I talked to them about it. Because it gives the experience somewhere to go. That's what storytelling does for me. It allows me to process it instead of just holding on to it. And I'm realizing that restoring doesn't always look like something huge. Sometimes it's really simple. A conversation, a moment of recognition, locking eyes with someone and you can see they get it, they understand. A space where I can exhale a little. And I think that's part of what YAIT is meant to be. A place where we don't have to carry everything quietly. Where we can name what we've experienced and begin, and even in small ways, to restore those moments that have been taken from us. Maybe not all at once, maybe not perfectly, but enough. Enough to feel a little more grounded and a little more whole and a little less alone. That to me is where restoring begins. Not in fixing, not in forcing, but in seeing clearly and giving ourselves space to carry differently. Seeing something different, experiencing something different, imagining something different. I think that's where we go next. And no, you ain't imagining this. Fam, we have covered a lot of content and discussed so many different things. racial socialization, invisibility, and our experiences in the room, full stop. And yes, our experiences are different, and yet they are scarily similar. This might be a good time to stop for today. I have finished my espresso, but not because there isn't more to say, but because some of this needs space, don't you think? Space to sit and to settle and to breathe. Because what we've been talking about isn't just something to understand. It's something that we've lived and that we've carried. Sometimes we've carried it quietly, perhaps most of the time. And sometimes we've carried it without even realizing how much we've been carrying and holding. I think that's my story. And if you're noticing that for yourself right now too, just stay with it for a while. Let's do that. Let's not judge ourselves. Let's not decide we gotta fix this. Let's just be aware, because that's where restoring ourselves begins. Not in changing everything all at once. I know that is so tempting to try, but really in being able to see clearly what we've learned, what we've internalized, and what we've been carrying. And giving ourselves a little bit of room with it and a whole lot of grace. Let's also be a little bit more understanding with ourselves and each other, and give ourselves and each other a little space to choose when it feels possible. And as we continue, we'll begin to move into something else. We've gone from naming to restoring, and next we'll go to imagining. Don't you love that? What it feels like to move through these moments with more ease, with more presence, and with more of ourselves intact. Not perfectly, but differently. And until then, take care of yourself in those moments. The quiet ones, and there are a lot of quiet moments that just go on past us, and the ones that stay with us. The ones that you might not have named before. And if this stayed with you, please share it with someone who might need it, with someone who's been carrying something similar, because this is how we begin to loosen what we've been holding alone. And to remind each other, you ain't imagining this. I can't wait to see you back here at Umoja Cafe. Ashe fam.